There are things in life we bury so deep we think they'll never resurface. But the past has a cruel way of knocking on your door when you least expect it. And in my case, it knocked wearing a clerical collar. Hello, my loves. This is Grandma Joanne, 78 years young, speaking to you from my little corner of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's a big town now, but still holds pieces of my story scattered throughout its streets. Today I'm going to share something I've kept in my heart for over 5 decades. A story that changed the course of my life in ways you couldn't imagine. You know, some people say a woman's wedding day is the happiest of her life. And it should have been. Oh, my dears, how it should have been. But sometimes life has other plans, and what should have been a fairy tale can turn into a nightmare in minutes. Before I continue, the team at this channel is running a $500 giveaway for our subscribers. To participate, just like this video and comment with something interesting about yourself. Where you're watching from, how many grandchildren and children you have, what your hobby is, your age, and much more. I'm excited to read the comments and see who wins this amazing prize. I was born in 1946 in a small town called Millfield, in the heart of Pennsylvania. A place where everyone knew everyone, where gossip traveled faster than a tumbleweed rolling downhill, and where a priest's word was worth more than a notarized document. My father, Ernest, owned a small but respected general store. My mother, Connie, sewed for others and made the best pastries in the region. We were a simple family, but happy. I grew up running through dirt yards, climbing apple trees, playing hopscotch with the other girls on the street. Life was hard, but had a sweetness that's hard to find nowadays. Everyone helped each other. Doors stayed unlocked, and we slept without fear of anything except the boogeyman our mothers invented to keep us from going out at night. It was at a 4th of July celebration in 1967 that I met Jack. I was 21, he was 25. He worked as a mechanic at the only garage in town, always had grease-stained hands, but the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was dancing with my cousin when I tripped on my own dress. I would have fallen flat on my face if it weren't for 2 strong hands that caught me. "Careful, miss. Uncle Sam doesn't like to see pretty girls getting hurt at his party," he said, with that smile that made my heart do a somersault. From that day on, Jack never left my side. Every day he'd stop by my father's store to buy something. A pack of cigarettes he didn't even smoke, a box of matches he didn't need, a piece of taffy he'd distribute to the street kids. Any excuse was valid to see me, to exchange a few words, to steal a smile from me. My father, who could be fierce as a bear when he wanted to, soon noticed the young man's intentions. But Jack was hardworking, respectful, from a known family. It didn't take long for Ernest to give his blessing to the courtship, with the condition that everything be done properly, with respect, as was customary. And it was. Jack treated me like I was made of crystal. He took me for walks in the town square on Sundays after church, always with my mother or brother watching. He brought me wildflowers he picked on the way from the garage. He wrote letters that I keep to this day, full of promises of a happy future, a house full of children, eternal love. The marriage proposal came on Christmas 1967. The whole family gathered for dinner, the house smelling of eggnog and roast turkey, when Jack asked permission to speak. He knelt right there in the middle of the living room, took a small box from his pocket, and asked the question every girl dreams of hearing. "Joanne, you're the light of my days, the reason for my living. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Of course I said yes. I jumped on his neck, crying and laughing at the same time, while the whole family applauded and my mother already started planning the wedding out loud. We set the date for April 13th, 1968. 6 months to prepare everything. The dress, the party, the house where we would live. Those were the happiest months of my life until then. Each day that passed was one day less until I became Mrs. Joanne Wilson. It even had a nice ring to it, didn't it? The wedding dress was made by Mrs. Martinez, the best seamstress in town. White satin, long veil, lace she had brought from Philadelphia especially for me. I insisted on paying every cent with money I saved selling cookies at the market. I wanted it to be mine, earned with my sweat, to enter this new chapter of life on the right foot. The chosen church was St. Mary's, the only Catholic church in town. Father Augustine, who had been there for over 10 years, would be the one to celebrate our wedding. Everyone liked him. He was still young, must have been about 35, always smiling, always willing to help. He visited the sick, taught catechism to children, organized charity events to help needy families. Father Augustine is a saint, my mother would say. God blessed our town with a man like him. How we can be deceived, right, my dears? How we can look at a person and not see the demon living inside them. The week of the wedding, the entire town was in a frenzy. It was the event of the year. Ernest's daughter marrying the best mechanic in the region. The women prepared treats for the party. The men organized the church decoration. The children rehearsed to throw rose petals at our exit. On April 12th, the day before the wedding, I went to church for confession, as was tradition. Every bride had to confess before getting married, to enter matrimony with a clean soul. Father Augustine received me with his usual smile, led me to the confessional. "Nervous, my child?" he asked. "A little, Father, but more anxious than nervous. I can hardly wait to start my life with Jack. It's natural. Marriage is a sacred sacrament, a union blessed by God. I'm sure you'll be very happy." I confessed my silly little sins, a little lie here, gossip there, an impure thought somewhere else. Father Augustine gave me absolution, wished me happiness. I left the church feeling light as a feather, ready to start my new life. If only I had known what awaited me the next day. April 13th, 1968 dawned beautiful. Bright sun, blue sky without a cloud, birds singing as if celebrating with me. I woke up at 5 in the morning, too anxious to keep sleeping. I took a long bath, washed my hair with rose soap my godmother had given me as a gift. At 7, friends arrived to help me get ready. The house turned into a women-only party. Laughter, conversations, advice for the wedding night that made me blush to the roots of my hair. My mother cried with emotion every 5 minutes. My father pretended to have something in his eye to disguise the tears. The wedding was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon. At noon, we began the final preparation. The dress was put on with all care, each button fastened with love, each pleat adjusted to perfection. The veil was secured with pins that my grandmother had used in her own wedding 50 years before. Something old, for luck. At 2 o'clock, I left home for the church. Tradition dictated that the bride arrive earlier to make the final preparations in the small room at the back of the sacristy. It was a small but tidy room, with a large mirror, chairs, a small table with a water pitcher. Brides used it to add final touches, calm their nerves, pray a little before the ceremony. My mother, my sisters, and my friends accompanied me there, helped me with the final adjustments. The dress was perfect. The veil fell like a white cascade. The bouquet of wildflowers gave the final touch. I was feeling like a princess about to meet her prince. At 3:30, they started leaving to take their places in the church. "See you at the front," my mother said, giving me a kiss on the forehead. "You look beautiful, my daughter. Your father should be outside already, waiting to walk you down the aisle." I was alone in the little room, looking at myself in the mirror, hardly believing that in half an hour I would be a married woman. That's when I heard the knock on the door. "Come in," I said, thinking it was one of the girls who had forgotten something. But it wasn't. It was Father Augustine. "Good afternoon, Joanne. I came to see if everything is all right, if you need anything before the ceremony." "Everything is great, Father. Thank you for your concern." He entered the room, closed the door behind him. I thought it was strange, but didn't say anything. After all, he was the priest, right? A man of God. What harm could there be? "You really are very beautiful," he said, approaching. "Jack is a lucky man. Thank you, Father." He went to the small table, picked up the water pitcher. "You must be nervous. Would you like a glass of water? It will help calm you down." I was indeed thirsty with anxiety. "Yes, please, Father. Thank you very much." He served the glass, handed it to me. The water had a slightly bitter taste, but I thought it was because of my nervousness. I drank it all at once. "There," he said, taking the empty glass from my hand. "Now just relax and everything will be fine." It was a matter of minutes. Suddenly, I felt a strange dizziness, weak legs, blurry vision. I tried to support myself on the chair, but my strength was abandoning me. "Father, what's happening?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, watching me with a look I had never seen before. A look that gave me fear, great fear. I tried to scream, call for help, but my voice wouldn't come out. My body no longer obeyed me. I slowly slid to the floor, the wedding dress spreading around me like a white shroud. The last thing I saw before blacking out was his face approaching, that smile everyone thought was saintly transforming into something monstrous, diabolical. After that, only darkness. When I began to wake up, the first thing I felt was pain. A pain different from anything I had ever felt in my life. Pain all over my body, but especially in a part of me that no one had ever touched. A pain that came from inside, that tore, that burned. I tried to open my eyes, but everything was blurry. I tried to move, but every movement was agony. I felt something warm and sticky between my legs. Blood. A lot of blood. The memory of what had happened before I passed out came in flashes. The priest, the glass of water, the dizziness. But what happened after? What had he done to me? I didn't need to be very smart to understand. The pain, the blood, the marks I felt all over my body, slaps, bites, scratches. My wedding dress torn, thrown carelessly over me. My underwear, no sign of it. I tried to scream, but only a weak moan came out. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't obey me. I stayed there, thrown on the cold floor of that little room, bleeding, crying, praying that it was a nightmare, that I would wake up and none of that would have happened. That's how my mother found me. It was already past 4:30, the wedding delayed, everyone worried. She came looking for me and came face to face with that scene of horror. Her daughter, who had left home dressed as a bride, radiant with happiness, now thrown on the floor like a rag, violated, destroyed. Her scream echoed throughout the entire church, a scream of pain, of despair, of a mother seeing the worst nightmare become reality. In seconds, the little room was full of people, my father, my sisters, Jack. Oh, Jack's look when he saw me. It was as if they had ripped out his soul. He fell to his knees beside me, trying to cover me with his jacket, hands trembling, eyes full of a mixture of pain, anger, and despair. "Who did this? Who did this to her?" he shouted, looking at everyone, searching for a culprit, an explanation. But I couldn't speak. My tongue was heavy, my thoughts jumbled. The sedative was still taking effect, mixed with the trauma, with the pain, with the shame. I could only cry and curl up, wanting to disappear, wanting to die. They rushed me to the hospital. Dr. Jerome, the only doctor in town, confirmed what everyone already knew, but no one wanted to say out loud. I had been raped, brutally, repeatedly. "There are signs of sedative in her system," he told my father, thinking I wasn't listening. "Someone drugged this girl before doing this." The news spread through town like wildfire. Ernest's daughter, Jack's bride, had been attacked inside the church on her own wedding day. But by whom? Who would have done such a monstrosity? Jack turned into a wounded animal. He went all over town, interrogating everyone, looking for clues, threatening to kill whoever had done that to me. The wedding, of course, was canceled. How could there be a celebration after such a tragedy? I returned to my parents' house, carried, mute, broken inside and out. I locked myself in my room, refused to eat, to speak, to live. What was there to live for? My honor was lost, my body violated, my future destroyed. In a small town like Millfield, a dishonored girl had no more place in the world. But the worst of all was not remembering. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see the face of who had done that to me. I remembered the priest giving me water. I remembered passing out. And then just the pain, the blood, the horror. Who had entered that room after I passed out? Who had been the monster who destroyed my life? The investigations led nowhere. The sheriff, a pot-bellied and lazy man, asked a few routine questions and shrugged. "There's no witness, no way to know," he said. Could have been anyone who entered the church. Anyone. As if it were normal for someone to enter a church, find an unconscious bride, and decide to rape her. As if it were something that happened every day. The town was divided between those who pitied me and those who whispered behind my back. Did she provoke it? some murmured. A decent girl doesn't stay alone with a man in a closed room, as if I had chosen to be drugged and raped on my wedding day. Jack remained by my side steadfast, saying he still wanted to marry me, that nothing had changed, but I saw in his eyes that everything had changed. How could he touch me without remembering that another had touched me first, and in the worst possible way? How to build a life on ruins? It was my grandmother, Josephine, who planted the first seed of truth. One afternoon, while combing my hair, she said softly, "Child, do you remember who gave you the water?" "Father Augustine," I replied, not understanding where she was going. "And after you drank the water, what happened?" "I got dizzy, passed out." She was silent for a moment, continuing to comb my hair. Then she whispered, so softly I almost didn't hear, "What if no one entered that room? What if whoever did this was already there?" My blood froze. No, it couldn't be. Father Augustine was a man of God, a saint. Everyone said so. He wouldn't be capable. Would he? My grandmother's words kept hammering in my head day and night. What if whoever did this was already there? But how to accuse a priest? How to even think such a thing? In those days, my dears, a priest was more respected than a doctor, than a sheriff, than a mayor. A priest's word was worth more than an oath in court. I spent weeks locked in my room, eating the minimum to survive, taking sponge baths because I couldn't bear to be naked under the shower. Every time I closed my eyes, I tried to force my memory, tried to see through the sedative fog. But it was like trying to grab smoke. The more I tried, the more it escaped. Jack came to see me every day. He would sit on the porch with my father, drink coffee, ask how I was doing. Sometimes I would peek through the window crack, see him there, downcast, suffering as much as I was. My father tried to convince him to move on, find another girl, rebuild his life. But he would shake his head, stubborn. "Joanne is my fiancée, Mr. Ernest. No matter what happened, she remains the woman of my life." 3 months after that cursed day, I woke up in the middle of the night with a flash of memory, a smell. Incense mixed with sweat. The same smell I felt every time I went to confession, when I was in that tight cubicle of the confessional. The same smell that was in the little room before I passed out. I got out of bed trembling, my heart racing. Could it be? My God in heaven, could my grandmother be right? Could it have been the priest? The next day I gathered courage and told Jack. I called him to talk in the backyard, away from curious ears. When I spoke of my suspicion, I saw his face transform. First disbelief, then understanding, finally a rage so great I thought he would explode. "That son of a bitch," he said through clenched teeth. "That bastard in robes. I'm going to kill him, Joanne. I'm going to tear his soul from his body." "No, Jack, you can't do that. First, we're not sure. Second, you'll go to jail, and then what? What will become of me without you?" He paced back and forth like a caged animal, fists clenched, jaw locked. I had never seen Jack violent, but at that moment, I saw he was capable of killing for me. So what do we do? Leave him loose out there, saying mass, confessing girls, pretending to be a saint? We need to be sure first, and then we'll think. That's when our private investigation began. Jack was smart, had studied through high school, knew how to put the pieces together. He started asking around, discreetly, about the priest. Where was he at the time they found me? Had anyone seen him near the little room? The answers appeared gradually. Mrs. Sophie, who helped clean the church, said she had seen the priest leaving the sacristy in a hurry, shortly before the wedding was supposed to start. The altar boy, a boy of about 12, told that the priest had sent him home early that day, said he didn't need help. But the main piece of the puzzle came from where we least expected. Mary, a girl who had moved to New York, returned to visit her family and heard about what had happened to me. She came looking for me one afternoon, asked to speak in private. "Joanne," she said, looking at the ground, "I need to tell you something. Last year, before I moved, the priest, he tried something with me too." My heart nearly stopped. "What do you mean, tried?" I had gone to confess. He started asking strange questions about my intimate life, if I had a boyfriend, if I had already, you know. I thought it was strange, but I answered. Then he left the confessional, came to my side, started running his hand through my hair, saying I was too beautiful to be alone. Tears ran down her face as she told the story. I got scared, stood up to leave, but he grabbed me. He tried to kiss me, ran his hand over me. I managed to push him away and run, but I was so afraid, so ashamed. Who would I tell? Who would believe me? At that moment, I was certain. It wasn't the first time Father Augustine had done something like this, and if he had done it with Mary, tried with me, how many others might have suffered in silence? Jack became even more furious when I told him about Mary. But now there was a different gleam in his eyes, a gleam of someone who was plotting something. "Leave it to me," he said. "I'll take care of this. Jack, for God's sake, don't do anything crazy." "I won't, but that bastard won't go unpunished. Trust me." 2 weeks later, Jack showed up at home with a strange expression. He called my father for a private conversation, then the two called me. The three of us sat in the kitchen, doors and windows closed. "I discovered some things about the priest," Jack began. "Things that the diocese wouldn't like to know." My father frowned. "What kind of things?" "He diverts money from collections. I have proof. He takes part of the tithe and sends it to his family in Baltimore. His mother has a house that doesn't match a washerwoman's salary. His brothers live the good life without working." "And how did you discover this?" I asked. "I have my methods. The important thing is that now we have leverage against him. The plan was simple but risky. Confront the priest, make him confess what he had done to me, threaten to report the embezzlement if he didn't leave town. It wasn't real justice, I knew, but it was the most we could get at that time, in that place. My father didn't like the idea. It's too dangerous. What if he reacts? What if he denies everything and ends up harming you?" But Jack was determined. "Mr. Ernest, with all due respect, but look at the state of your daughter. Look at what that monster did to her. Do you want him to continue out there, doing this to other girls?" In the end, my father agreed, but he insisted on going along, even took the old revolver he kept at home. I stayed at home with my mother and sisters, praying that everything would go well, that there wouldn't be an even greater tragedy. They returned almost 2 hours later. Jack with a closed face, my father pale as paper. They sat in the living room, asked for whiskey. My mother served with trembling hands. "And?" I asked, unable to stand the anxiety any longer. Jack took a big swig before answering. He confessed. Not at first, of course. He denied it, acted offended, threatened to call the police. But when I showed the embezzlement documents, when I said I was going to send everything to the bishop, he changed his tune. My father continued, "He admitted he gave you the sedative. He said he couldn't control himself, that the devil tempted him." The devil. How easy it is to blame the devil for our monstrous acts, isn't it? How convenient to have a scapegoat for the evil that lives inside us. "He's leaving," Jack concluded. "I gave him a week to request a transfer, to invent some excuse. If he doesn't go, I'll send everything to the bishop and the police." A week later, Father Augustine announced at Mass that he had been transferred to a parish in rural Maryland. He said it was God's will, that he had to take the word to more needy places. Some church ladies even cried, lamenting the loss of such a good priest. If they only knew. But his departure didn't heal my wounds. The trauma was there, deeply ingrained, haunting me day and night. I couldn't enter a church without shaking. I couldn't see a clerical collar without feeling nauseous. I couldn't imagine being touched by any man, not even by Jack, who had all the patience in the world with me. The town continued to gossip, speculate, judge. Without knowing the truth, they invented their own versions. Some said I had a secret lover who had attacked me out of jealousy. Others, that it was a voodoo thing, a spell cast by some envious woman. And there were always those who insinuated that the fault was mine in some way. 6 months after that fateful day, Jack came with a proposal. "Joanne, let's get out of here. Let's go somewhere else. Start over. Get married far from these stairs, these poisonous tongues." But where? And our family? I have a cousin in Lancaster. He has a garage there, needs a mechanic. It's a big town. Nobody will know our story. We can start from scratch. The idea of leaving Millfield was both frightening and liberating at the same time. Frightening because it meant leaving behind everything I knew, my family, my roots. Liberating because it was the chance to escape the pitying looks, the whispers, the memories that haunted me at every corner. My parents were reluctant at first, but seeing my condition, seeing that I wasn't getting better, that I continued to wither away in that town that had become my prison, they eventually agreed. My mother cried a lot, hugged me as if she would never see me again. "Go, my daughter," she said. "Go be happy far from here. Forget this misfortune and build a new life." In January 1969, Jack and I left for Lancaster. We took few things, some clothes, essential furniture, and a lot of hope for better days. We got married in a civil ceremony as soon as we arrived. A simple ceremony, just the two of us and the witnesses the judge arranged. It wasn't the dream wedding I had imagined. There was no white dress, no party, no waltz. But it had what mattered. The love of a man who chose me, even broken, even marked, even with a story that would drive anyone else away. The adaptation wasn't easy. Lancaster was much larger than Millfield, busier, more impersonal, but that was good in a way. Nobody knew who we were, where we came from, what had happened. We could invent our own story. Jack started working at his cousin's garage. I got a job at a fabric store downtown. We rented a simple but decent little house, bought our furniture gradually, building our nest. On difficult nights, when nightmares came, when the past knocked on the door, Jack would hold me, calm me down, remind me that I was safe, that no one would ever hurt me again. "You're the strongest woman I know," he would tell me. "You survived the worst, and you're still here, standing. That's courage, Joanne. That's strength." Slowly, very slowly, I began to heal. Not completely. Some wounds never fully heal, but enough to smile again, to dream again, to live again. I made friends at work. We learned to cook together. We discovered beautiful places in the new town. A year after moving, I got pregnant. When the doctor confirmed it, I cried like a child, not out of sadness, but out of fear. How was I going to take care of a child if I could barely take care of myself? How was I going to protect my child from the evil of the world if I hadn't been able to protect even myself? Jack calmed me down, as he always did. "You're going to be a wonderful mother, and our child will grow up surrounded by love, protected, happy. The past doesn't define our future, Joanne." He was right. When I held my first child in my arms, a healthy boy who took after his father's eyes, I felt that I was finally turning the page. The past was still there, would always be. But it no longer needed to command my life. We had 2 more children after that, 2 beautiful girls who now give me wonderful grandchildren. I raised them all with love, with care, with the certainty that they would never go through what I went through. I taught my daughters to be strong, not to blindly trust anyone, to know their rights. Years later, with the children grown, I received a letter from Millfield. It was from Mary, the one who had told me about the priest. She was writing to say that Father Augustine had died. Massive heart attack during a mass in Maryland. Fell face down on the altar in front of everyone. "They say in recent years he drank a lot," she wrote. "He lived tormented, talking to himself, asking forgiveness from ghosts. I think his conscience weighed on him in the end." I closed the letter, threw it in the trash. I felt neither joy nor sadness at the news, just emptiness, a feeling of a chapter finally closed. Divine justice? Coincidence? I don't know. I just know that the monster who destroyed me on an April afternoon ended up destroyed by his own demons. Today, at 78, I look back and see a life that was rebuilt from the ashes. It wasn't easy. It wasn't without pain. It wasn't without scars. But it was my life, conquered with struggle, with courage, with the love of a man who saw beyond my traumas. Jack passed away 5 years ago, victim of a damned cancer that took him in 6 months. Before dying, he held my hand and said, "Thank you for choosing me, Joanne. Thank you for giving me the chance to love you. I'm the one who should thank you, my love, for staying, for fighting with me, for showing me that not all men are monsters, that true love exists and heals even the deepest wounds. The silence that for so long screamed inside me is now filled with grandchildren's laughter, with stories of overcoming, with the certainty that I survived and won." The priest thought he had destroyed me that afternoon. Little did he know he was creating a warrior. Life in Lancaster followed its course. My children grew up healthy. Jack prospered at the garage. It seemed we had finally left the past behind. But you know how it is, right? The past has a stubborn way of returning when we least expect it. It was in 1978, almost 10 years after that cursed day, that the pieces of the puzzle began to come together in a way I could never have imagined. My oldest son, Ernest, I named him in honor of my father, was 8 years old and needed to make his first communion. I was terrified of entering a church, as you can imagine. But for my children, I would face anything. The catechist was Sister Benedictine, an elderly nun who had been transferred from Baltimore. A sweet woman, soft-spoken, who gradually gained my trust. One afternoon, after picking up Ernest from catechism, she called me for a conversation. "Mrs. Joanne, you're from Millfield, aren't you?" My blood froze. How did she know? We had been so careful not to talk about the past. "Why do you ask, sister?" She sighed, looked at the crucifix on the wall before continuing. "Because I'm from there too. I left many years ago, but I knew your family. Your father had a store, your mother sewed." I nodded, heart tight. Did she know my story? Was she going to spread it to the whole town? "I know what happened to you," she said softly. "And I came to Lancaster precisely to look for you." "What do you mean, look for me? Why?" What she told next changed everything I thought I knew about that terrible day. Sister Benedictine had been a nun at the convent in Baltimore, where Father Augustine sent part of the diverted money. But it wasn't for his family, as Jack had discovered. It was to keep something much worse secret. Father Augustine had, how can I say, serious problems. The diocese knew, but preferred to transfer him from parish to parish instead of facing the scandal. Each time something happened, they moved him to a different place. My head was spinning. How many times? How many women? "It wasn't just women," she said, and I saw tears in her eyes. "There were girls too, teenagers, sometimes even children. You weren't the first, nor the last." I felt such rage that my whole body trembled. How many lives had that monster destroyed? And the church knew? Knew and did nothing? "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need your help. There's a group of women, his victims, who are organizing. We want justice, even if delayed. We want the church to recognize what it did, to pay for its complicit silence. The idea of reliving it all, of making my most painful secret public, terrified me. But thinking about how many others had suffered like me, how many more could suffer if we continued silent. "I need to think," I said. "Talk to my husband." Jack, as always, supported me. "If that's what you want, if you think it will help, I'm with you. Always." It took me a month to gather courage. A month of sleepless nights, of conversations with myself, of prayers asking for strength. In the end, what decided me was thinking about my daughters. What if one day they went through something like this? What if the silence of women like me allowed other predators to remain free? I went back to Sister Benedictine. "I'm in. What do I need to do?" What I discovered in the secret meetings that followed was stomach-turning. We were 12 women, of different ages and from different towns, but with frighteningly similar stories. Father Augustine had a method. He would gain trust, choose the most vulnerable victims, use sedatives when necessary. Mary Grace from Harrisburg had been attacked at 15 during a confession. Connie from Elizabethtown was drugged during spiritual counseling. Each account was a punch to the stomach, a confirmation that evil had worn a collar for years, protected by silence and connivance. "We need concrete evidence," said Sister Benedictine at one of the meetings. "Documents showing that the diocese knew and covered up." That's when I remembered something. In the investigations Jack had done, he mentioned finding some strange papers, some letters. At the time, we focused on the embezzlement, but could there have been something more? I went home determined to go through our keepsakes. Jack kept everything, was organized like no one else. At the bottom of a shoebox, I found it. 3 letters written by Father Augustine to the bishop, confessing weaknesses of the flesh and requesting transfers. The dates matched the accounts of some of the women. "This is gold," said Sister Benedictine when I showed her. "Proof that he confessed to the crimes and that the diocese, instead of reporting, just moved him around." We decided to look for a lawyer. Mr. Reynolds, a young idealistic man who had just opened an office in Lancaster. When we told our stories, I saw the indignation on his face. This is a continuous crime with the aggravating factor of abuse of religious authority, and the diocese is complicit by omission. We're going to file a class action lawsuit. The process was hell. First, we had to convince the other women to expose themselves, to open their wounds in public. Some agreed, others backed out in fear. In the end, we were 7 brave women willing to face the church. When the news leaked to the press, it was a scandal. Philadelphia newspapers printed the story. The diocese tried to cover it up, threatened to sue for defamation, but the evidence was too strong, the accounts too detailed. My family suffered. My children were bullied at school, called the children of the woman who wants to destroy the church. Jack lost customers at the garage. There were people who no longer wanted to do business with the husband of the troublemaker. But we held firm, united. The trial took place in 1980. 2 years of judicial battle, of painful testimonies, of reliving old traumas. Every time I had to tell my story to the judge, to the lawyers, to the curious audience, I felt as if I was being violated again. But when I looked at the faces of the other women, I saw the same pain, the same courage, the same need for justice, and found strength to continue. The diocese's defense was dirty. They tried to discredit our accounts, insinuate that we were vindictive women, that we wanted money. They even hired a detective to investigate our past, to look for anything that could tarnish our reputation. That's when they discovered something even I didn't know. Father Augustine, before dying, had left a diary. His family, afraid of scandal, had given it to the Bishop of Maryland, who kept it under lock and key. But someone inside, touched by our struggle, leaked the contents. It was worse than we imagined. Pages and pages of sick confessions, detailed descriptions of the abuses, a list with names of victims, 47 in total, over 15 years of priesthood. My name was there, with the date, April 13th, 1968. "Today I sinned again," he wrote. "The bride was too pure, too beautiful. The devil tempted me and I gave in. May God forgive me, but it was worth it. Worth it. As if destroying my life had been a momentary pleasure that justified everything." With the diary, the diocese's defense crumbled. There was no more denying, no more pretending they didn't know. The evidence was overwhelming. In September 1980, the judge ruled in our favor. The diocese was ordered to pay compensation to each victim and to create a support fund for women abused by religious figures. It wasn't just about money, though God knows how much we needed it. It was about recognition, about lifting the veil of silence that protected predators, about saying loud and clear, "This happened, it was wrong, and someone needs to pay." The victory had a bitter taste. Father Augustine was already dead. He never paid criminally for his crimes. Other priests involved in the cover-up were just transferred. The structure that allowed the abuses remained intact. But something changed. After our case, other women found the courage to speak out. We created a support network, a group that exists to this day, helping victims of religious abuse seek justice and healing. My life was never the same after the trial. I lost my privacy, became that woman who sued the church, but I gained something more valuable, the certainty that my silence would no longer be complicit in other crimes. Sister Benedictine, who had been our greatest ally, was expelled from the congregation. They accused her of betrayal, of tarnishing the church's name. She accepted it with serenity, said she preferred to serve God outside the convent walls than be complicit inside them. Years later, at one of our group meetings, a young woman approached me. She was about 20, frightened eyes, the manner of someone carrying a heavy secret. "Mrs. Joanne," she said, "I need to thank you. Because of your courage, because of the lawsuit, my mother didn't let me be alone with the priest in our parish. She suspected, protected me. You saved my life." I cried like a child that day. All the pain, all the exposure, all the struggle had been worth it for that moment, for knowing that at least one girl had been spared the horror I lived through. Jack hugged me that night, proud. "You're a warrior, Joanne. You transformed your pain into a shield for other women. That's true faith." He was right. True faith wasn't in the men in collars who preached one thing and did another. It was in us, broken women who found strength to fight, to protect others, to scream when they wanted us to stay silent. The discovery that the church knew that it had been complicit by omission could have destroyed my faith. But I discovered that God doesn't just dwell in churches. He dwells in the courage to speak out, in the strength to rebuild, in the love that heals, in the justice that may be delayed but doesn't fail. Today, when I look back, I see that that priest thought he was destroying a defenseless bride. Little did he know he was creating a warrior, a voice that would multiply into many other voices, a cry that would echo for decades demanding justice. The confrontation with Father Augustine was just the first step in a much larger battle against an entire system that protected predators dressed as saints. When Jack and my father returned home that night, after hearing the priest's forced confession, I saw in their faces a mixture of relief and frustration. We had discovered the truth, yes, but so what? What could we do with it in a society where a priest's word was worth more than a woman's life? In the days following Father Augustine's departure from Millfield, the pressure for us to keep silent came from all sides. The new priest, Father Anthony, a newly ordained young man who came to replace Augustine, stopped by our house one afternoon. He said he came to console the family in difficult times, but it soon became clear what his true mission was. "I know you've been through terrible moments," he said, sitting in our living room, drinking the coffee my mother served out of politeness. "But it's important not to nurture feelings of revenge. God's mercy is infinite, and we must forgive even those who have done us harm." Jack, who until then had controlled himself, couldn't take it anymore. "Father, with all due respect, but you weren't here when they found my fiancée bleeding on the floor of your church. You didn't see the state she was in, didn't go through nights of nightmares, didn't witness—" "My son," the priest interrupted, "I understand your pain. But spreading rumors about a man of God can be more harmful to you than you imagine. The community needs peace, unity. It would be better for everyone if this matter stayed in the past." Rumors. He called my rape rumors, as if my pain, my trauma, my destroyed life were just small-town gossip. At that moment, I understood that we weren't just facing individuals, but an entire institution willing to sacrifice its victims to protect its image. My father, the religious and respectful man he had always been, this time didn't bow down. "Father Anthony, my daughter was violated inside God's house by someone who should protect her. If you think we're going to pretend nothing happened so as not to bother anyone, you're very mistaken." The priest left without getting what he wanted, but he came back several times, always with the same litany about forgiveness, mercy, and the greater good of the community. Sometimes he came accompanied by influential parishioners, the mayor, the pharmacist, women from the congregation who looked at me with a mixture of pity and censure. "Joanne is a good girl," they would say to my mother, "but she needs to understand that certain things are better left quiet, for her own good. No one will want to marry a girl who goes around saying these things about priests, saying these things, as if reporting a rape was bad manners, as if seeking justice was a lack of composure." The weight of silence was crushing. It came from all sides, suffocated more than the trauma itself. Jack, my dear Jack, was being eaten up inside. He saw the love of his life destroyed, had discovered who was responsible, but couldn't do anything. The priest's impunity, protected by the collar and by the system, drove him crazy with anger. "It's not fair, Joanne," he would tell me, pacing back and forth in the yard like a caged animal. "That bastard destroyed you, destroyed our dreams, and he'll continue out there as if nothing happened. He'll celebrate masses, give spiritual advice, maybe do this to other girls." It was this last possibility that tormented me the most. What if my silence cost another young woman's life? What if my cowardice allowed another monster to remain free? But at the same time, what choice did I have? Formally reporting it would mean reliving everything again, exposing my intimacy to disbelieving sheriffs, facing church lawyers who would do everything to destroy me. "What if we left?" Jack suggested one night, after another unwanted visit from the priest and his followers. "We don't need to stay here, enduring this pressure. We can start over somewhere else, where nobody knows our story." The idea was both tempting and terrifying at the same time. Tempting because it represented freedom, the chance to escape the looks of pity and judgment. Terrifying because it meant leaving behind my whole life, my family, my roots. But it's like running away, I argued. It's like giving reason to those who say the fault is mine. It's not running away, love. It's strategy. It's choosing our battles. Here, we both know we don't have a chance. The church is too strong, has too much power. Somewhere else, we can build our life without carrying this weight. We talked for weeks about the possibility. My family was divided. My father wanted us to stay, to face the situation with our heads held high. We didn't do anything wrong, he would say. Why do we have to leave like criminals? My mother, more practical, saw things differently. Here she'll never have peace. Everyone will always remember, always whisper, somewhere else. She can just be Joanne, not Joanne who was attacked in the church. My sisters were also being affected. At school, the other children repeated what they heard from their parents. Your sister is the one who... And the malicious comments would follow. They would come home crying, asking why people were so cruel. The social pressure increased as the days passed. The town was divided between those who discreetly supported us and those who preferred to believe that it was all invention or exaggeration. The most fervent church ladies were the worst. They spread rumors that I had provoked the poor priest, that I was making up stories to get attention. A decent girl doesn't stay alone with a man in a closed place, they would whisper at the market. If something happened, she must have given reason. Jack couldn't stand hearing these things. More than once, he almost got into a fight because of malicious comments. On one occasion, the son-in-law of one of the church ladies said at the garage that a woman who respects herself doesn't go around inventing stories about priests. Jack dropped his wrench and went after the man. He would have broken his face if other mechanics hadn't held him back. You don't know anything, he shouted beside himself. You didn't see the state she was in. You don't know what that monster did. And you're there, repeating poison, destroying someone who's already destroyed. The episode went around the whole town. Joanne's fiancé is going crazy, they commented. This whole story is hurting him too. As if the madness was ours, for not silently accepting injustice. The last straw was when Father Anthony decided to give a sermon on slander and defamation at a Sunday Mass. He didn't mention names, of course, but everyone understood who he was referring to. There are among us, he said from the pulpit, people who insist on spreading lies about men of God, who prefer to feed hatred rather than seek reconciliation, who choose revenge instead of forgiveness. My mother, who was at Mass, stood up and left in the middle of the sermon. Other people followed her, few, but enough to cause a stir. When she got home, she was shaking with anger. He's calling you a liar in front of everyone, she said. This can't continue like this. That's when we made the final decision. There was no point in staying, no point in fighting against a system that was determined to crush us. We would leave, but not as fugitives. We would go with our heads held high to build a new life where our truth could exist without being questioned at every moment. Organizing the move was more complicated than we imagined. First, Jack had to get work elsewhere. His cousin in Lancaster, Joseph, confirmed there was a position at the garage, but the salary would be lower at first. We would have to start from scratch, in every sense. Selling our things was painful. The furniture we had bought for the house where we were going to live after the wedding, the memories of a life that was brutally interrupted. Everything had to go for low prices. Those who buy furniture from people who are running away know they can haggle as much as they want. My father helped us financially, even though he didn't fully agree with the decision. It's money from selling the store, he said, handing me an envelope, for you to get established there. But promise you won't forget about us. As if it were possible to forget? As if leaving Millfield meant ceasing to love my family, my land, my roots. It wasn't that. It was just choosing between sinking or swimming, between dying slowly or seeking a chance to be reborn. We decided to get married in a civil ceremony before leaving. It wouldn't be the wedding of our dreams, that had been destroyed forever on that April afternoon. But it would be ours, true, free from pressure and malicious looks. The ceremony was at the courthouse on a December morning in 1968. Just our parents as witnesses, no party, no celebration. I wore a simple blue dress my mother had made, Jack his Sunday suit. When the judge asked if we accepted each other as husband and wife, we looked into each other's eyes and said yes, with a conviction that came from the depths of our souls. It wasn't the happy ending of the fairy tale I had dreamed of. It was the real beginning of a life we would have to build with our own hands, away from the spotlight, away from judgments, away from everything we knew. Now it's us against the world, Jack said, holding my hand as we left the courthouse. And we're going to win. I wanted to believe. I needed to believe. The bus that took us to Lancaster in January 1969 carried more than 2 people and some luggage. It carried hopes, fears, broken dreams, and the determination to rebuild a life that had been shattered. During the 6-hour journey, I stayed glued to the window, watching the Pennsylvania countryside change, the small towns giving way to a metropolis that seemed gigantic to me. Lancaster was everything Millfield wasn't. Big, busy, impersonal. The streets bustled with people, cars, commerce. No one stopped to observe us. No one whispered when we passed. For the first time in months, I was able to walk on the street without feeling gazes weighing on my back. Joseph, Jack's cousin, received us with genuine affection. He was a simple man, 10 years older than my husband, who had built a prosperous garage in the East End neighborhood. "Here you can start over," he said, showing us the little house he had rented for us. "No one needs to know where you came from or why you came. What matters is what you'll do from now on." The house was small but decent. 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, and bathroom. Whitewashed walls, concrete floor, a backyard where I planted herbs and flowers. It wasn't the home we had dreamed of, but it was ours. Clean of bad memories, free from ghosts of the past. The first months were the hardest. Jack worked from dawn to dusk at the garage, learning his cousin's ways, gaining customers' trust. I got a job at a fabric store downtown, selling yards of cotton and chatting with housewives about sewing and embroidery. It was liberating to be able to talk to people who knew nothing about me. To them, I was simply Joanne, the new girl who had come from the countryside to work in the city. I told them I was married, that my husband was a mechanic, that we were starting our lives. Simple truths, without weight, without hidden meanings. On difficult nights, and they still came, with nightmares and memories that assaulted me without warning, Jack would hold me, calm me down, remind me of where we were and why we were there. "That's behind us," he would whisper in my ear. "This is our future. Here, no one can judge us or hurt us." Gradually, we integrated into the new community. We met the neighbors, made friends at work, discovered the best places to shop. Lancaster welcomed us with the generosity of big cities, which have space for all kinds of stories without asking too many questions. In November 1969, almost 2 years after that terrible day, I discovered I was pregnant. The news caught me by surprise, not because we weren't expecting it, but because I had stopped believing my body could generate life after so much violence. When I told Jack, I saw tears in his eyes, not of sadness, but of pure, uncontained joy. "Everything will be all right," he said, hugging me carefully as if I were made of crystal. "Our child will grow up free, happy, without carrying the weight of what we went through." The pregnancy was both a blessing and an ordeal. A blessing because it gave me a new purpose, a reason to look forward instead of backward. An ordeal because fear consumed me. What if I couldn't be a good mother? What if my traumas affected my child? What if the world out there was as cruel to him as it had been to me? Dr. Edmund, the doctor who followed me, was a kind man who noticed my anxiety. "First pregnancy is always like this," he would tell me. "Normal to be nervous. But you're strong, Joanne. You'll be a wonderful mother." If he knew the whole truth, would he say the same thing? But that was the beauty of Lancaster. I could just be a pregnant woman, not a victim carrying scars. Ernest was born on a July dawn in 1970, after a long but uncomplicated delivery. When the doctor placed that tiny being in my arms, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 2 years. Pure joy, without mixtures, without shadows. He was a beautiful, healthy boy, with his father's eyes and a strong cry that filled the maternity ward. Looking at him, I understood that life had given me a second chance. Not to forget the past, that would never be possible, but to build something beautiful on the ruins. "Look," Jack said, touching our son's little face with trembling fingers. "He's perfect, our miracle." He really was a miracle. After so much destruction, so much pain, we were capable of creating life, of generating love, of being a family. The name Ernest was chosen in honor of my father, who had supported us even when he didn't agree with our decisions. 2 years later came Mary Connie in honor of my mother, a serene girl with big eyes and an easy smile who completed our small family. And 3 years after that, our youngest, Anna Beth, who arrived full of energy to shake up our routine. Raising 3 children in the 1970s without the support of the extended family wasn't easy, but each challenge overcome was a victory. Each milestone reached a proof that we had made the right choice. My children grew up free from the weight of our story, surrounded by love and protection. I taught them, especially the girls, the importance of knowing their rights, of not accepting abuses of authority, of trusting their own instinct when something didn't seem right. Without telling the sordid details of what I had been through, I planted in them seeds of courage and discernment. If anyone tries to make you feel uncomfortable, I would say, no matter who it is, teacher, priest, neighbor, anyone, you run and tell me. A promise to keep a secret about something bad is worth nothing. For 15 years, I lived under the illusion that I had managed to bury my past forever. My children were growing up healthy. Jack was prospering at the garage. He had become his cousin's partner. Our life seemed finally on track. But in 1984, a letter changed everything. It was from Mary, that girl who had told me about Father Augustine's attempted abuse. She was writing to inform me that other women had appeared with similar stories, victims of the same priest, scattered across various towns in Pennsylvania and Maryland. Joanne, the letter said, we discovered we were many more than we imagined, and we're organizing to seek justice. I know you've rebuilt your life, that you have a family to protect, but your voice could be fundamental for other women to find courage. My first instinct was to tear up the letter and pretend it had never arrived. My life was good, my children knew nothing, why stir up healed wounds? But my conscience wouldn't leave me in peace. If other women had suffered what I suffered, if the monster had continued his destructive rampage, wouldn't my silence be complicit? I talked to Jack, of course. After so many years together, we had no secrets from each other. He listened, reflected, held my hands. The decision is yours, he said. If you want to participate in this fight, I'm by your side. If you want to keep our life as it is, I also support that. But remember one thing, you're no longer that frightened girl from Millfield. You're a strong woman, a mother who has built a beautiful life. If anyone can face this battle, it's you. I sought out Sister Benedictine one September afternoon. She lived in a simple house in the West End neighborhood where she maintained a support center for needy women. She no longer wore religious habit, had left the congregation after our lawsuit, but continued to serve God in her own way. I knew you would come, she said, hugging me as if we were old friends. You look like someone who can't stay silent when it comes to justice. What she told me left me astounded. We weren't just a few isolated women. It was a systematic pattern of abuse that spanned decades. Father Augustine had been transferred from parish to parish whenever problems arose, leaving a trail of victims wherever he went. The diocese knew, Sister Benedictine explained. They had documents, reports, confessions, but they chose to transfer instead of punish, to cover up instead of confront. They are complicit in every act of violence he committed after the first uninvestigated complaint. It was revolting to discover that my case hadn't been isolated or exceptional. It was just one more in a long list of crimes covered up by an institution that claimed to represent God on earth. It took me weeks to make the decision. I thought about my children, who were then 14, 12, and 9 years old. How to explain to them that the mother they had always known as strong and determined had a past of violence and trauma. How to protect them from the consequences of a legal battle against the church. But I also thought about how many other Joannes might be suffering in silence. How many shattered families, how many predators protected by the collar and institutional power. Mom, my oldest daughter said to me one night, seeing me too worried to hide it, "Are you okay? Seems like something's bothering you." I looked at that smart, determined girl, whom I had raised to be strong and independent. If someday someone tried to harm her, I would want other women to have fought before to create a world where her pain would be taken seriously. There is something, my daughter, but it's an adult thing. A very old injustice that maybe it's time to correct. "Then you have to correct it," she said with the simplicity of youth. "You always teach us that we can't let wrong things pass unchallenged." It was the answer I needed to hear. The process that followed was even more difficult than I had imagined. Not just because of the pain of reliving old traumas, but because of the impact on my family. When the news leaked to the press, journalists discovered our identity, our address, our story. My children came home from school with questions they didn't know how to ask. Classmates had shown them newspapers, made comments, repeated rumors. I had to sit down with each of them, adjusting the language to their age, and tell a version of the truth they could understand and carry. "Why did you never tell us this before?" Ernest asked, with the typical teenage revolt against injustices. "Because sometimes we need time to become strong enough to fight. And because I wanted to protect you from a very sad story." "But now you're fighting," Mary Connie observed. "Now I'm fighting so other girls don't go through what I went through. So you grow up in a world where these things don't stay hidden." It was hard, but our children surprised us. Instead of shame or revolt, they showed pride. Pride in having a brave mother who wouldn't be silent in the face of injustice. They began to defend our cause at school, to counter malicious comments, to position themselves as children of a warrior. When we won the lawsuit in 1985, the feeling was strange, joy mixed with emptiness. We had proven our truth, forced the recognition of injustice, obtained compensation. But Father Augustine had been dead for 5 years. He would never pay criminally for his crimes. He would never look his victims in the eyes and admit the harm he caused. The victory was important, less for what we achieved and more for what it represented. Other women found courage to speak out. The church was forced to create protocols to deal with abuse allegations. The veil of silence that protected predators was torn, even if partially. "It's not about revenge," I told reporters after the sentence. "It's about preventing other families from going through what we went through. It's about saying loud and clear, these things happen, they are wrong, and those who do them will pay." Today, at 78, I look back and see a life that could have ended on that April afternoon in 1968. But it didn't end. It was transformed, resignified, made stronger by its own scars. My children have become wonderful adults. Ernest is a mechanic like his father, but studied engineering and has his own garage. Mary Connie became a lawyer, specializing in defending women victims of violence. Annabeth is a teacher and works with sex education in schools, teaching children about consent and protection. "You planted in us the seed of justice," Mary told me on one occasion. "Each case I take, each woman I help find courage to speak out, is a continuation of your fight." I have 8 grandchildren now who are growing up in a world different from the one I knew. Not perfect, of course, but where a victim's word carries more weight, where allegations are investigated, where silence is no longer the only option. Jack passed away 5 years ago, victim of a cancer that took him in 6 cruel months. Before dying, he held my hand and said, "Thank you for letting me love you. Thank you for building this beautiful family with me. Thank you for showing me that love is stronger than any trauma. I'm the one who should thank you, my eternal love, for staying when others would have fled, for choosing to rebuild instead of abandon, for giving me children who carry our love forward, multiplying it in future generations. If you've made it this far in my story, my dear, thank you for listening. It wasn't easy to tell, even after so many years. But I've learned that silence is injustice's best friend, and I don't want to be complicit in any evil anymore. If you've been through something similar, know that you're not alone. The fault is never the victim's. Trauma can change your life, but it doesn't need to destroy it. It's possible to rebuild, to love again, to be happy, even carrying scars. If you know someone who's been through this, be patient. Healing has no set deadline. Some take months, others years, some a lifetime. The important thing is not to give up on yourself, not to let evil win. And if you're in a position of power, be it parent, teacher, religious leader, anything, remember, with power comes responsibility. Use it to protect, not to oppress, to liberate, not to imprison, to heal, not to hurt. The world still has much evil, much suffering, much injustice. But it also has people like Jack, like Sister Benedictine, like my children, like each of the brave women who joined me in the fight. It has love, hope, possibility for change. I survived the worst day of my life and built decades of good days on the ruins. If I could do it, you can too. Don't give up. The world needs your light, your strength, your story, and always remember, you are stronger than you imagine, braver than you believe, more loved than you suspect. Your life has value, your voice has power, your existence makes a difference. That priest thought he was destroying a defenseless bride on an April afternoon. Little did he know he was forging a warrior who would inspire other warriors, in a chain of courage that has already lasted more than 5 decades and will last much longer. From the ashes of my destroyed dream, a real, true, powerful life was born. And that, my dears, that no one can take from me.